Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode in our virtual event series covering the electrification of private and public sector fleets. I'm Alana Weitzman, VP of Strategic Development at Electric Autonomy, and I lead our content programming for the EV Fleets Pro Academy. I'm really excited to introduce this installment of the EV Fleets Pro virtual event series, Vehicle to Grid, or V2G, for fleets and utilities in the real world. Before we dive into today's discussion, I'd like to thank our partner, Polara, for supporting today's session. Polara has been a great knowledge partner for EVFleets.pro and has helped us develop the lesson on energy management and smart charging. Today, we are going to level that up with a topic we are asked about all the time: the potential for fleets to supply the grid with energy from their vehicle batteries when they are not in use. This is clearly a hot topic, as we have had over 260 people sign up for today's live conversation. Polara is currently a partner on a groundbreaking project in California, where a local school district is using bidirectional charging, or V2G, to supply power to the local utility PG&E. Polara is also working on vehicle-to-building projects, and in tandem with their software platform, Clio, can tailor full hardware and software solutions for V2G projects across North America. And also, just to get out the acronym decoder, the V stands for vehicle, the 2 stands for energy going in 2 directions, and the G is for grid. And now on to the topic at hand. We're going to start with Ernie, who is kind of at the center of this whole ecosystem. Ernie's day job is getting kids to school and back every day safely and securely. And so I think my question for you is, can you paint a picture of how this works as a day in the life of your school buses? How do you operate and act as an energy source for the grid? And like, have you had to make any changes to your typical schedule?
First off, thank you for allowing me to join this wonderful panelist, as a panelist of this wonderful group. So, uh, keeping time sensitive, I'll try and hit the highlights of school bus transportation, as any colleagues in the audience of mine are aware of, that this is something that is extremely complex on its own. And then when you add something like a vehicle to grid or fleet sustainability efforts into the mix, your plate can get rather overflowing rather quickly. However, all that aside, we operate with the intent of student safety and student service at the forefront. And when I say we, I mean all the school bus drivers, directors, managers, dispatchers, mechanics, all that good stuff. So operationally, we have to ensure that we're still there to pick up little Johnny at 8:05 or whatever time we tell them we're going to be there. And how does this effort meet that goal? And the answer to that is pretty complex. However, with folks like Polara and the Mobility House and our OEMs on the manufacturing side, they've made it pretty painless once the system is in place, to ensure that operation isn't interrupted. So from a driver perspective, it's no different than having to put fuel in a diesel fuel or gas fuel. I mean, actually, it's a little easier and cleaner because you're just essentially plugging something in, and the software and everything takes over after that. So again, without getting too deep into the weeds, it hasn't changed much on the operational standpoint.
That's great. And in terms of the schedule, you're in California, and so there's the real need for the energy, I'm guessing, is in the summer. So it kind of, I imagine, dovetails nicely.
Yes, our peak times around here happen roughly 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. When everyone's getting home from school and off of work, and appliances are firing up to get dinner ready, get the house cooled down. Although in the Bay Area we have a pretty moderate climate, so it's not too bad. But there are areas of this state where, I mean, you'll get months and months at a time where temperatures are in triple digits. I originally come from the Central Valley, and I know all too well what that heat is. So trying to get, the grid is really taxed around that evening time or pre-evening time. and so a project like this really sustains and helps out, that grid resiliency.
That's great. So your buses are already sort of back and able to operate by the time that peak hits. The kids are already happily at home having their snacks, I imagine.
For the most part, there are a few exceptions here and there, like field trips, but that's the exception, not necessarily the rule. But yeah, for the most part, we're back.
That's great. So now I'm going to turn to our other panelists to sort of start building out the technical infrastructure of what's kind of behind all the school buses you see behind us. Brad, we're going to start with the vehicle, which is this school bus with a pretty substantial battery, lots of storage potential. How does the vehicle integrate into the system? How does it talk to the other parts of the system?
Great question. So, we got 3,000 of these buses out in the US and Canada, and a majority of them are set up for this activity for V2G. And obviously, more recently, the ISO 15118-20 is the ISO standard we've moved to. The bus itself is really just a storage reservoir, right? It stores electricity when the charger charges it. And then in the case of a V to G, V to X, V to V, you pick your V, you can then call the charger to draw that energy from the actual bus itself. So again, think of the bus as just a storage facility for this energy. And then similar to what happens with other renewables like solar and wind, it's just an integral part of being able to store that energy and then use it as needed for things like peak shaving or just supplemental energy or even emergency backup, right? A school bus, obviously during emergencies, may serve for backups for server farms, for hospital equipment, for even things like communication. So it's a key element, but the bus has to be able to talk to the charger. That's its main thing. So as part of that ISO protocol, they exchange certificates and then they're able to talk with one another in a very cyber secure manner and exchange that energy.
So the charger then becomes the next piece of the puzzle that's talking to the bus. And for that piece, I'm going to turn to Sebastien to walk us through what that piece of the chain looks like.
So in Fremont, for example, when we started the project, Fremont already had some legacy equipment on site, and it was basically one switchgear, 10 AC chargers at 19.2, and four DC chargers. I believe they were 25 kilowatt chargers. So for the V2G, we added a charge pack, which is our proprietary product. It's basically the distribution equipment on a skid that can drive both level 2 and level 3 chargers. So you can push 480 volts for the DC and 240 for the AC chargers. We added the 2500 amp three-phase distribution and three 60 kilowatt bidirectional DC chargers for phase one. Obviously, we had to align with PG&E on inverters standards. UL 1741 is the acceptable pathway for now, and obviously making sure that protections are in place. So in California with PG&E, PG&E does not allow two separate EV services on one property. So we needed to upsize the transformer and rework the incoming to meet fault duty and clearance. So basically synchronizing with the utility prior to making any plans, technical plans or equipment layout is very important.
That's great. Sarah, stacked on top of that is I guess the intelligence that makes all of this work. And I'm wondering if you can kind of take us through that as well.
Absolutely. So, for starters, one of the things that's great about this project, and something that allows us to use this project over and over again at other schools, is the use of all these open standards and all these certifications. So earlier, Brad mentioned ISO 15118-20. That's something that's being used at this project at Fremont. Our software, which manages the chargers both unidirectionally and bidirectionally, is speaking to the chargers via OCPP, which is Open Charge Point Protocol. And it's using the 2.x version that includes bidirectional. And so, again, nothing proprietary, and allows that technology to be used elsewhere again and again. The UL 1741 that Sebastian mentioned as well, for the utilities to approve it. And then once our technology's there, that's when you really start to see the operations and how this looks for Ernie. Our software is going to make sure, first and foremost, primarily the buses are charged when they need to charge. We do not want to leave any children stranded, nothing like that. And so we'll take into account all the schedules of the vehicles, when they need to leave, how long their routes are. And we're going to optimize the charging for them based on what the cost of their electricity is, and all of those things. And then we've stacked on top of that now this bidirectional component, the V2G. And with that, we are doing a demand response program called ELRP, the Emergency Load Reduction Program. And again, in order to execute on that, we have built to these standards. So OpenADR is the most common standard for demand response, and that's what we've built to. And so all this just kind of happens behind the scenes. Ernie's drivers, they come back, they plug in, and that's all they need to really worry about. As long as the bus is plugged in, it'll be charged in time for its route. And as long as the bus is plugged in, we'll receive that signal from the utility that a demand response event is happening in 24 hours, 25 hours, sometimes 1 hour. And the technology will just automatically instruct the vehicle to discharge at that time.
Ernie, I see you nodding along. Is that what it feels like as an operator, that this is all happily happening in the background?
Certainly from my level and from the driver's perspective. Whereas a lot of our drivers here at Fremont, we were sort of some of the earlier adopters to electric buses. And there was a time before this came along that we had to be very mindful when we plugged in the bus and when we unplugged the bus. And in regards to the increased taxing on the grid. So we get off-peak hours. So at one district, we would have somebody, the night custodian, go through and plug in before he left at 9:30 p.m. to ensure we were getting that off-peak pricing. Now, what the beauty of the software that folks like Mobility House through Charge Pilot provide is, it is simple. The driver is done for the day. Okay, closing up the bus, and the last thing used to be locking the doors. Now it's locking the doors and ensuring we're plugged in. So on the driver's perspective, it's actually simplified things. From our perspective, we do monitor to ensure that we're the health and maintenance of the charge system is working. But for the most part, it is pretty much a set it and forget it routine for our drivers and for our operators here at our shops and our dispatchers and office personnel.
That's great. Brad, I'm gonna kind of ask what I'm sure is the big question for a lot of folks, is around the battery, and that, like a cell phone, there's a limited number of times you can charge the battery and discharge that power, whether that's for driving or feeding the grid. What is kind of the real story when it comes to that battery chemistry? How durable is it? How many cycles can these batteries withstand? How do they operate in punishing conditions like heat? I wonder if you can sort of take us through that a little bit.
Those are all great questions, because obviously this isn't just a storage battery sitting somewhere that has constant climate control, right? It's on a bus. So, whatever the ambient temperature is outside, whether the wind's blowing, whether it's getting rained on, it's propelling that bus down the road with that battery. So over the course here, we're going almost into our 8th year of this EV school bus product. So, and as we got into V2G, certainly we had to consider that. So even the warranty for the battery talks about really what used to be cycles. We considered, 3, 4, 5,000 running the battery down to a 0 state of charge on the usable and then bringing it back up to 100% state of charge was a cycle. It's now expressed in gross kilowatt hour throughput. That's kind of cool, right? So it's looking at actually how many kilowatts itself are passing through. You can measure it off of time in hours if you want to do that. In general, then it's this gross exchange it's looking at. What we're finding is, and while there's basically in transportation two chemistries out there, there's NMC, which is nickel, manganese, and cobalt in lithium structure, and then you got the lithium iron phosphate or the LFP batteries. Both of them are used commonly for moving vehicles down the road. NMC still the most common for passenger cars and light trucks. The LFP is kind of coming into the heavier section like we have with school buses and tractor trailers. But in both cases, they have a given or finite number of cycles. But at the same time, we're finding they're lasting a lot longer. I mean, a lot longer than anybody anticipated. So it's not uncommon that something's on the road for 10 years with that same chemistry, and it's lost very little of its ability to retain the usable charge itself. So with that means that right now we're looking at 390 megawatts that can pass through as a gross discharge as part of warranty on this battery. That's a lot of energy, right? I guess trying to keep it at that high level, it's not really a concern if a bus is used in V2G. The actual energy it uses and takes on in charge is much higher than even the level that is being put out for output and power. We can put out 60,000 watts of power. That used to be more than the radio stations were when I was a kid growing up. That's 60,000 watts was cool. And obviously, growing up in Detroit, we got a lot of Canadian stations that were coming over with that amount of power. So, to those in the Canadian landscape, I used to listen to Canadian radio to find out when school was closed, even though I was in the U.S. to figure that one out. Anyway, we're not concerned about that 60 kilowatts of energy really degrading the battery because it can take on, on the charge cycle side up to 120 kilowatt. And certainly the vehicle is using that in some cases as it's running accessories and using the drive motor, pushing that bus down the road. So there's a lot of studies going on right now on transportation battery degradation. And what we're finding again is on the usable portion that these vehicles, even over hundreds of thousands of kilometers and the drive cycles that they've been in, the amount that they're degrading is much less than anybody even on the engineering and development side thought. So there you go.
That's great. I mean, that's really good news. And I think just sort of moving over to another kind of good news story over to you, Ernie, is the financial incentive of this project. So how does this benefit the school district financially by being a provider of power to the grid?
I've always taken on this question in kind of a two-pronged approach. One, I've sort of made the joke that we're not going to be able to buy yachts or anything with the money we're generated. But the good news, what we're able to do is to ensure that it gives us a little bit of a price break on our PG&E when we couple it with our utility. Sorry, our PG&E is our local utility. So it ends up, diminishing the amount of that we're paying out each month for the energy that we're using, especially when you consider you couple it with advantages like the low carbon fuel standard credits that these chargers generate. We're not quite at a neutral as far as fiscally neutral level, but we're definitely where we're seeing savings, and those savings are directly passed along to the classroom. So as a director of transportation, it's my job to ensure that our operations have the least amount of budgetary impact on the classroom as possible, so that every dollar is leveraged toward actual student education. So in that sense, that the financial is giving us savings there, and on the other end, there's a huge a good like sort of a public connection saying that we're able to contribute to grid's resiliency in this, and parents and certainly people in our local community are happy that we're on board with that, because no one wants to be without power.
So we covered, I think, a little bit the fleet point of view. We have an audience question from registration from the other side, which is, what does the utility have to do to provide such a service? Is it costly? And I think linked to this, I'm curious if any changes were required at the upstream infrastructure, such as transformers, breakers, etc. So I'm guessing that Sebastien and Sarah will want to answer this one. Sebastien, let's start with you.
I would add just a few comments just for maybe precision. On the Fremont site, we added 60 kilowatt bidirectional chargers, and I think that to give the flexibility, the operational flexibility, and the peace of mind, as Sarah was talking about, so that the software can manage everything, it's important to right size the site so that you have enough energy going in the bus in a shorter period of time, and then being able to discharge the vehicle when it makes sense. So if you're not sizing your infrastructure properly, you will lose opportunity because the window of charging time might be too small to optimize your discharge and generate revenue. So that, I think that's an important aspect. As for what utility needs to do, I think that there's two main angles. First one is interconnection certification, and the other one is more on the physical side, protection, visible disconnects, and capacity, obviously, in that region. And utilities need a positive way to disable export. So they need to be able to shut down the site for security reasons, for obviously people working on the grid while you're re-injecting. You need to make sure that this is covered. And basically in Fremont, we did have to upgrade the transformer, to right size the transformer, to make sure that we were able to export the maximum energy that the infrastructure would permit. So basically right sizing the infrastructure. Again, I'm repeating myself, but really synchronizing well with the utility to make sure that everything is understood and planned out before doing anything on the ground. And then yeah, that sums it.
Sarah, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I won't talk about the hardware and the infrastructure portion. That was definitely more, Polara's expertise and why we brought them into this project. But on the utility side, a lot of it that enabled this, that I think, if other utilities in Canada and elsewhere started to implement, would allow this to happen more is, having some of those standards, having some of those processes in place. PG&E, which is where Fremont is located, that territory, has these standards in place, requires certain, Rule 21 infrastructure for V2G, has a process to apply for that bidirectional interconnection that we were able to follow. And so that's kind of, I think, the biggest opportunity right now for utilities is to start putting that into place so that people can start putting more V2G, and then providing a program that has revenue. We're able to participate in this demand response program because it exists. It's directly available. PG&E also has some other ways that folks in different segments can make some money back by discharging to the grid. And so as more and more of those start to become commercially available, and we're not just talking about pilots, that's where this becomes easier. In working with the utility, I think, there's still a lot to be done. It's definitely speed. We wanted to move really fast on this project, and it's a lot of different paperwork, a lot of we had to get the interconnection approved, then we had to get the inspection, get the permission to operate, and then we had to actually get the meter changed to be bidirectional, and change the meter number and the account ID and all of that. And so all those pieces just take time. And so I think just building a really good relationship between the project partners and the utility to get that stuff done is really important.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing, but I think that the interconnection discussion needs to become standardized and boring. And uh, the monetization side, I think, the utility should play like any other storage. It needs to be known in advance, predictable, so that transporters or other companies that own fleet can plan in advance in those infrastructure investments. And obviously, um, you know, every utility could have like a quick 2-page playbook, easy, that they could list a bunch of pre-approved equipment and certification that they would require. That would definitely speed up things. The interconnection is where it takes months, sometimes quarters. I think that is really the culprit, and having utilities plan better would make life easier for those kinds of projects and investments.
Yeah, it's interesting that there's the kind of standardized interconnection and design process, and then also standardizing the incentives, so that fleets can predictably monetize their investment is both. It sounds like both are incredibly important to get this system moving, as we said, in the real world.
Absolutely.
Um, so sort of piggybacking on that again, another audience question. Can you compare electric utility capables to support V2G? So I don't know if there's some leaders out there, provinces, states that are doing this really well. It sounds like PG&E, for instance, working with you, has probably sorted out a lot of the knots in getting this connection made. But Sarah and Sebastian, I don't know if you could point to some utilities that are kind of on the front foot for this.
Lots of pilot programs in Quebec with Hydro-Quebec. We have a couple of those, one being a V2B, so V2 building project with a municipality. A lot of utilities want to jump in, but are still really in the early phase. We're seeing traction with Con Ed as well. So the northeast of the US is starting to move. BC Hydro as well in British Columbia. So we're really seeing a movement towards a real interest. And there was recently I think it was a MIT study that they did, and for just that utility in the Northeast, it was something like 14 gigawatt hour of power that they see coming in from V2G fleets or vehicles in the coming years. So it will make a huge impact for utilities, and fleets and vehicles really become a tool to have a smarter grid, help them manage various grid problems, such as whether it's frequencies, whether it's a lack of power or the need of more energy. All those re-injection or export can handle and help utilities with their very specific challenges.
So interesting. I think you sort of have pointed towards a couple more of our audience questions. One is pretty blunt, which is how do we make utilities want to move to V2G? So I like the way that was phrased. Sarah, I don't know if you can pick that one up, or Brad.
I'm happy to start that off, I guess. I think that V2G is a necessity. It's not about wanting it. I think the more electric vehicles you get on the grid, the more the grid's going to be constrained, and utilities are going to have to implement V2G programs and incentivize customers to do V2G to spread out that charging to take some of the constraint off the grid during those peak times. And so the question isn't really how do you get utilities to want to do V2G, it's how do you move the total vehicle electrification industry along to the point where the grid gets to where we all know it's headed anyways. And, that comes with incentives, but it also comes with standards. Really, at the Mobility House, we really believe strongly in standardization. We don't do custom integrations, proprietary protocols. Everything we do is open standards. And I think that's the biggest way to get the industry to move forward.
Yeah, I'll add to that, we've got the tools in place now, and it's interesting from my perspective because I've been involved in this now a quarter century plus on and off, right? So we've been doing this a long time. And utilities on the electric side for electric vehicles have always been a critical element. And here we are a quarter century later where we all are looking for this new technology to be embraced, right? And we've been tracking toward it. But you still have these, I'll call them standards that aren't necessarily applicable across the utility companies and across the borders between US and Canada. So hopefully that starts, we've got the tools, right? We've got the storage device, we've got the chargers that are able to do it. Even though it's DC to AC, AC to DC, DC to AC back, it's all very fun on the technical side. We're ready to go, and we just have to have the utilities kind of aligned as well. And I think that'll happen. I really do. As we get more successful demonstrations that turn into larger deployments, it'll happen.
Yeah, and I would add when we approach an utility with a concrete program, they're really interested in learning more and giving us support to implement, even if they haven't been really active in the field. Maybe another comment, because I was reading some of the comments and section and questions in the chat, and we've obviously seen increasing prices on batteries or vehicles, small and medium duty vehicles. But Ernie was referring earlier to LCFS, which are the carbon credit units that are created, that also adds up to a tool of monetization. In Canada, we're lucky. We have a similar program called the CFR, and the value of the CFR currently is around $300 per credit. And last year, we were able to monetize tens of thousands of units for our fleet customers. And to give you an example, a bus like a Bluebird Class C model will generate approximately $6,000 to $7,000 worth of credits. So it makes a huge, and that's yearly at that $300 price. So that makes a huge difference in the ROI of your investment or purchase.
That's great. You've also mentioned V2B, and that is a question of, when we are looking to move power from the vehicle to the building. I specifically have a question how this could work for a community building in a First Nations community. Brad, I'm gonna
I could feel that one coming my way. And so think of this as, vehicle to building is probably I'll call it the precursor stepping stones to trying to make it easier for true vehicle to grid activities to take place. And I actually have one coming together that I'm hoping we actually use as a demonstration, falling together in Texas. So, I mean, you think of it as wind and solar have to put energy somewhere, and it's usually into a battery, right? That's where it goes. Well, you're talking about the First Nation side of it. A lot of them have renewable that's already available to them, and this battery just becomes, part of that system, whether it's on a bus or it's stationary. But when it's on a bus, it allows them to use it for more than just one thing. So it may be that vehicle gets used most of the time, but in certain circumstances, that building needs to be powered up for whatever reason. And this bus becomes that enabler, right? You don't have to have the extra investment in stationary batteries. It also gets for those types of, I'll call most of those places are very rural, correct? They're out in a way where they can't be attached to the grid. it gives you a moving power source to be able to not only use it for, a single V2B, but, it could be V2B in multiple locations. So super, super cool when you think about it from that. And batteries, they like to be used in that manner. So it not only is then beneficial for, the community, it's also beneficial for that battery because it's doing a little extra duty there. It's certainly able to be signed up for without a doubt. So that's a great application, a great question. V2B is the stepping stone.
That's super. Our live chat is kind of blowing up. So I'm going to, just while we queue up all of our live audience questions, I want to tell you about some very exciting events that are coming up next year. First is the Kilowatt Hour Summit on April 7th at Hotel X in Toronto. We convene this event in partnership with the Transition Accelerator, with the mind to connect utilities and the EV industry to explore exactly what we've been talking about today, grid transformation as we electrify transportation. And so I'd really encourage you to join us there live to continue this conversation. Just the day after, over 900 organizations gather annually for the EV and Charging Expo. That takes place April 8th and 9th at the Enercare Center in Toronto. And the expo offers a complete conference program with experts in fleet electrification, multi-unit residential charging, and public charging for both the private and public sector. My colleagues are going to put links to all these events in the chat. We also have, of course, a combo ticket for both events, which you can find on either the EV and Charging Expo website or the Kilowatt Hour Summit website. And so now I'm going to turn back to our panel to answer some of the great live questions we have coming in today. So I'm going to ask a question from the Hydro-Quebec Research Institute. How do you address the cybersecurity aspects of V2G operations? Sebastien, I wonder if you can chime in here first, because you are former.
I used to work for ELO, which was a subsidiary of Hydro-Quebec. So for our side, and I'll let Sarah talk, but there's cybersecurity standards out there. As for Clio, our platform, we're SOC 2 Type 2. So we have the certification. So and we have audits, external audits that verify that the data and the platforms are highly secured. Obviously, on the infrastructure side, there are some basic locking mechanism and access restriction that are applied so that you can do that. But I think it's the cyber side is the most I will say high stake challenge that we always need to evolve and make sure that the teams develop the solution so it's secure.
Sarah, I don't know if you wanted to jump in there as well.
Yeah, I can add a little bit. So, all the communications between our device on site and our cloud are all fully encrypted. Communications with the charger fully encrypted. Similar to what Sebastian said about their platform, our platform as well, our company as well has SOC 2. And so, I get cybersecurity is definitely a big topic, and it's something we're very aware of. We have a lot of security in our software requiring two-factor authentication and all of those things as well.
Okay, great. This is a question, when we were chatting earlier, we mentioned that for this project, you participate in a demand response program called emergency load reduction, which is the kind of incentivization. That is where the incentives are. But someone wanted clarification that you are actually pushing enough energy to make the meter run backwards during those events. So Sarah, I don't understand the technical piece of this, but I'm sure you can respond.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are actively pushing back. We're seeing negative amounts on the total meter, getting compensated for that. The program we're participating in California compensates $2 per kilowatt hour that is discharged during that event. And so, Ernie can see on the dashboard he has of our software, he can see the negative power. We can look up, on the true ups from the utility that we are, in fact, pushing completely back to the grid. This program I'm talking about is also available unidirectionally. It's measuring your reduction compared to your baseline that you have on, typical days that look like this to the utility. So if it's a weekday from, 4 to 8 is the event, they'll look at, previous 4 to 8 p.m. Weekday baseline and how much peak you have, and you'll get paid for that reduction. So if you just do V1G, meaning you kind of stop or reduce charging during the event, you'll also get compensated. But when we start actually pushing the energy back to the grid, our compensation, almost doubles.
That's very cool. I have a question for you, Ernie, which is the school district integrating any lessons plans into the curriculum, allowing students to learn about EVs and V2G technology because they're riding in it every day?
As far as the curriculum piece, I wouldn't have a whole lot of hands on that. However, I am part of an initiative between my department and transportation grounds, our child nutrition service department, and our technology department. We've sort of come together as a result of a student-led initiative that resulted in a board resolution to create a climate team. So our curriculum and instruction department leads that. So I know there is specific curriculum in this going out to the classrooms. As far as what those specifics are, I'm not aware. But we do get a chance to showcase twice a year, once to our Board of Education at a board meeting, all of our updates that each department is doing. For instance, our grounds department is doing a lot of work with planting new trees, taking the mulch from the clippings and all that and turning it into, just an educational piece for the kids at the school site to plant gardens, things of that nature. So we're just one piece of a bigger sort of task force between all of our departments to get this pushed out to the kids. And the wonderful thing at Fremont here is that initially back in 2019 was actually student-led. So this is our Board of Education as well as the department leaders reacting to that and providing hands-on opportunities. The second piece of the educational piece that we do as part of a task force, we allow field trips for our kids to come by and see what we're doing here at transportation, as well as the other departments I mentioned. So yes, to long answer to your question, we are integrating this to the kids and they're really excited. They're seeing career opportunities here. So for some of our secondary education students, for the ones in high school and things of that nature, they're also very innovative in their approach to support things of this nature, like the planting of the gardens and utilizing the clippings from our grounds crew as mulch and things of that nature.
That's super. Brad, I have a very specific question for you. We have seen ISO 1511820 be out in draft for quite a while. When do you see broad adoption by OEMs for both EVs and chargers?
That's a great question. The interesting thing is we were on Dash 2 and we still have Dash 2 running in the background, which is like back from 2013-14 time frame. And then Dash 20, even though I think a lot of people think it's been around a long time, it really got its traction in 22, so about 3 years ago. You have a lot of charger manufacturers along with a lot of the people on the vehicle side trying to coordinate, currently. So we've ran some through an actual test, with Bluebird, at least on our product. We got, Microbird, which builds the Type A for us, and our vehicle are, both working off that Dash 20 now with full certificate, which means the charger has to be able to house those certificates, and the charge control unit, the old CCU on the bus, needs to also house the same certificates. For a lot of people that we're talking to, had to explain that, and it's not necessarily an easy process. But we're now off the draft, so there's a lot of people that were running off a draft and into the full certified, which gives you that cybersecurity layer between the charger and the bus, and also gives utilities that want to use this for a VGG activity the confidence that this thing is less likely or very unlikely to be hacked. And not only that, but beyond that, Dash 20 kind of required us to go back to the whole system in the bus, not just the battery and the charger interface, to make sure that it had the cybersecurity level needed as well, so that upstream from the battery itself, there wasn't somebody that could get into a system on the bus and put energy where it's not actually intended to be, and follow the true spirit, the true spirit of ISO 15118-20, right? So it's a super fascinating topic. If anybody ever wants to have a sidebar on it, I'll be happy to do that. And we're hoping that this one stays for a while, so that, again, the change in standard causes everybody to potentially have to pause, and we're hoping this one's here to stay. So
That's great. I have a good question around the clarifying the sort of incentive. Actually, a couple questions around that. So, clarifying the $2 per kilowatt hour for participating in the program. There's who kind of participates in that benefit? Does it all go to Ernie? Is it shared between the software platform and the fleet? I think it's good to clarify these things just so that folks can understand how the ecosystem really works.
Yeah, happy to take that. So the mobility house is registered as an aggregator with the utility. So the money goes directly to us for all of our customers that we have, all of our sites that we have that are registered in this program. And then, in our additional, agreements with specific customers like Ernie, we would, decide how much of that is passed to them and how much of that is kept.
Okay, perfect. And Sebastian, when you were talking about some of the incentives that your platform manages, I imagine it's a similar structure, that you are considered an aggregator of things like credits, incentives for participating in demand response or V2G.
Yes, yes, very similar. It always depends on the how the utility is set up, and what kind of relationship they want. Some utilities don't have aggregators relationship. They will just make a rebate or a payment on the client's invoice. So therefore, it's more like a service that Cleo or the mobility house would provide to those types of clients. So it's I think the software platform will just align with the utility, the structure of the utility.
Super. And again, staying in this kind of zone, you know, I could imagine in the future that what fleets might want to do, especially if they're not on a set schedule like a school bus, is sort of quickly repower the vehicle to be able to send that power to the grid when it's needed. But we have this thing called demand charges. Do you foresee utilities being maybe mindful of that and giving fleets a break on demand charges because they know they're going to use this asset to support the grid? Sarah, I see you nodding.
Yeah, I think we've seen a little bit of that already. In California, there are specific EV rates that different utilities have for fleets, and some of them have waived demand charges for the next 5 years. Some of them are primarily focused on the energy charges and how those look. So we're starting to see that. I think it's a temporary thing to incentivize folks to start this technology. I don't see it as a permanent thing. I think the permanent solution really comes with the software. Our software is not going to just charge up at full power in order to do the event. It's going to look at what can we make for the customer in the event. How much would it cost to charge up? We are definitely not in the business of spiking a customer's utility bill just to be charged in time for an event, right? We want them to have the lowest total cost for their fleet, and that includes the charging and the demand response. And so Yeah.
And building on that, I've got a question around virtual power plants. So we could imagine once you have multiple sites like this all connected, do you have a mind to make any changes on sort of the software to deploy V2G at scale, and bring that in as kind of a bit, maybe a bit more of a reliable sort of probabilistic source of energy for the grid?
Yeah, it's definitely technology we have and technology we're improving on for the different markets that are available and growing. It depends on the program. So for something like ELRP, it's very site specific, but there are other programs where we might bid in, and that's where we're going to look at the whole portfolio we have and the whole VPP and make the best decisions for our customers.
And Sebastian, I don't know if you wanted to add to that as well.
Right. So I think that a software like the Mobility House or Clio is really the first layer that retain much of the energy value to a VPP, where the VPP will or could have various ancillary energy products, whether it's 30 minutes reserve or 10-minute reserves or frequency. I know in California or the West Coast has frequency problems or challenges. So those fleet tools to the utility could really help the utility, and that's how the VPP will be able to decide where are the assets that makes more sense to use at the very specific time for which energy product or ancillary product. So yeah, I think that we will see a lot more creativity in the type of energy services that fleets can provide through the softwares.
So we're just about at time, but I do want to kind of turn to Ernie and sort of ask you a kind of a really, I think, basic question, which is that you already have a day job, but you sort of launched yourself into this kind of energy future and actually energy present project. What's your motivation?
Hey, that's a very deep question. No, so the motivation is honestly, again, I kind of peel it back all the way to what is my reasoning. My most basic reasoning for my role is student safety and student service, right? So it all starts there and kind of trickles down with something of this magnitude. I'm not an electrical engineer. I am not a software engineer. I am a bus driver who gets to dress up and wear a tie, essentially. And I understand a little bit about how to get massive amounts of people from point A to point B. So to build on your questions, like, so why did I do it? Essentially, it was, again, our student service model is to be responsible with the public funds that had been entrusted to me, and part of that is going after grant opportunities that are mutually beneficial both to the student classroom. They might not have a direct connection to the classroom, but they're with the monetary savings that we're seeing and the sustainability for the future, right? It does have sort of an indirect contact there, and that's something that I'm supposed to be doing. That's not, maybe not laid out in my job description. However, it is my responsibility to find the most fiscally responsible way, the safest way to transport our kids to home and school and on our activity trips. And for me, that's where this all kind of lies, is in that scenario, or in that effort. So I hope I answered your question.
That's super. So with that, we're at the end of the session. Ernie, Sebastian, Brad, Sarah, a huge thank you to everyone for sharing all of your insights. I love how technical we got. I love the depth we went to. So many takeaways, I think, from today's discussion. I also want to thank the audience. You really drove this discussion. We had just fantastic questions, and I think the level of sophistication in our audience is also, added tremendous value to today's session. So thank you again. Also, a big shout out to Polara for being great partners in the EV Fleets Pro program. We could not have conducted today's session without you. So I want to thank everyone for being with us today. And we hope to see all of you in person at one of Electric Autonomy's events in 2026.